Today, we are diving deep, deep into the world of learning German.
Oh yeah, we're going all in.
That's right. We're talking how to conquer this language from absolute beginner all the way to fluency. And get this, our intel comes from a brand new study that's not just about, methods and tips. It's about the actual science of how our brains pick up a new language.
It really is. And the scope of this thing is incredible. It covers traditional classroom stuff, but also looks at apps and even digs into like the psychology of motivation.
So honestly, I was wondering if this study could really offer like a clear path through all that.
Oh, it absolutely does. And, it doesn't shy away from the challenges either. It acknowledges right up front that, yeah, German can be a real climb for us English speakers.
Okay, that's good to hear at
But
least.
here's the silver lining. This study says that once you understand the WHY behind the difficulty, the HOW becomes a lot more manageable.
Okay, now we're talking. So what are some of those like aha moments from the study? What really jumped out at you?
Well, one of the most fascinating parts for me is how it dives into something called Creation's input hypothesis. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of it, yeah, but I could definitely use a refresher.
Sure. It basically says that we learn a language best when we're exposed to content that's just a little bit above our current level. So it's like, imagine you're working out a muscle. You need to challenge it to make it grow.
Makes sense.
So instead of getting bogged down in grammar rules right away, the study suggests immersing yourself in like authentic German content. Think podcasts, maybe easy news articles, even children's shows, believe it or not. The important thing is finding stuff that you enjoy and that keeps you coming back for more.
Right. So it's not just about hitting the books, it's about experiencing the language in a more natural way. That makes sense. But what about actually speaking? A lot of beginners, myself included, we can feel intimidated to actually open our mouths and, let the German flow.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you. And that's where Swain's output hypothesis comes into play.
Okay.
This theory, it basically argues that speaking and writing, even if you mess up, even if you make mistakes, are absolutely essential for solidifying your grasp of the language. When you force yourself to produce the language, you're actively engaging with all that grammar and vocabulary, and that makes the connections in your brain so much stronger.
So it's like those mistakes are actually valuable.
Exactly. They're not something to be afraid of. They're learning moments.
I like that.
And then you've got Vygotsky's sociocultural theory, which is all about the power of interacting with native speakers. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to pick up new words and phrases when you're actually chatting with someone?
Well, absolutely. When I was first learning Spanish, I had a friend who was a native speaker. And just hanging out with her, even if we weren't formally studying, I mean, it did wonders for my fluency. It's my
Exactly. That's the magic of it. The study really emphasizes those casual interactions, those moments where you're actually using the language to communicate and connect. It's like a fast track to fluency. It's about moving beyond, rote memorization and actually experiencing the language in a real world context.
Okay, so we've got this mix of theories. Immerse yourself in content that challenges you a little bit. Don't be afraid to speak and make those mistakes. And chat with native speakers whenever you get the chance. It's going to make a pretty solid recipe for success.
Hmm.
But I'm curious about how the study, recommends applying these theories to actually learning German. Like, where do you even start?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The study breaks down the learning process into these stages, starting with A1, which is, the beginner level,
Yeah.
and going all the way up to C2, which is basically, mastery. And for each stage, it gives you a tailored approach based on these foundational theories that we've been talking about.
All right, so let's break it down step by step.
Hmm.
Let's say someone is brand new to German. They're at that A1 level. What's the first step? What are those crucial building blocks?
Well, the study suggests starting with the essentials, learning, basic vocabulary, getting a grasp of those fundamental grammar concepts like sentence structure and verb conjugation, and getting familiar with the sounds of the language. It's all about laying that solid foundation.
So flashcards, grammar drills, maybe some listening exercises. But how do we avoid that feeling of being overwhelmed? I remember when I started learning German, I bought this massive textbook, and I felt paralyzed just looking at it.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And that's why this study really stresses finding resources that actually resonate with you. For example, if you're a visual learner, flashcards with pictures might be your best friend. If you're more of an auditory learner, try listening to podcasts specifically designed for beginners. They usually speak nice and slowly, clearly, and they often explain new vocabulary and grammar as they go.
Wait, slow German podcast. Now that's a great idea. It's like training wheels for your ears. I wish I'd known about those when I was starting out.
Right. And don't forget about the power of technology. There are amazing apps out there, like Anki, that use this thing called spaced repetition. It helps you memorize new words and phrases so much more effectively.
Space repetition. That sounds really cool.
It is. It's like a personal trainer for your vocabulary.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture here. We're taking those big, intimidating theories and kind of breaking them down into, bite-sized, manageable chunks.
Right.
But what about when you progress to that next level, the A2 level? What changes then?
Well, at the A2 level, the focus shifts to building on those foundational blocks and actually starting to use the language more actively. So you'll start working with simple dialogues and maybe even trying your hand at writing, like short, basic sentences.
So taking those building blocks and creating something with them.
Got it. And this is where another really interesting concept comes in, and it's called lexical chunking. Have you ever heard of that?
It rings a bell, but refresh my memory. What's that all about?
Sure, it's the idea that learning phrases, not just individual words, is the key to sounding more natural and fluent. So instead of painstakingly constructing sentences word by word, you start to recognize and use these prefabricated chunks of language.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Like ich möchte, which means I would like, or wie geht es Ihnen,
Yeah.
which means how are you, those kind of things.
Ah, I see, I see. So it's about recognizing those patterns and using them as building blocks.
Exactly. And the study really stresses that this type of learning, it happens naturally when you're exposed to authentic German content. Like even children's shows are great for this. They use simple language, they repeat key phrases often, and it just reinforces what you're learning.
Plus, they can be pretty entertaining, even for adults.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, don't tell anyone, but I actually picked up quite a bit of Spanish from watching cartoons with my nieces.
See, it works.
It totally does. It just goes to show that learning can happen in the most unexpected ways. The key is just finding what works for you, what keeps you engaged and motivated.
Okay, so we've covered A1 and A2. We've got our foundation. We're building sentences. We're even using some of these fancy tricks like lexical chunking. I'm guessing things get even more challenging as we climb higher, right?
Oh, yeah, they definitely do. But that's where the real fun begins.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive into that next level in part 2.
All right, we're back and ready to tackle the next stage of our German adventure. We've built our foundation, we're starting to craft those sentences, we're even thinking in phrases like we talked about. What's next? What happens at the B1 level?
Well, at the B1 level, things get a little more real. The training wheels come off a bit.
Okay.
It's about going beyond those basic building blocks and really starting to find your own voice in German.
Finding our voice. That sounds interesting, but what does that actually mean, practically speaking?
It means engaging with the language on a deeper level. You'll be tackling more complex grammar, diving into longer and more nuanced texts, and even having those conversations that go beyond just basic everyday exchanges.
So it's like we're moving past those survival phrases and really starting to express our own thoughts and ideas. You got it. And that requires a real shift in mindset. Instead of just focusing on accuracy, you start to prioritize fluency and expressing yourself authentically, even if you stumble a bit along the way.
That makes sense. I remember when I was learning Spanish, there was this one moment I was having a conversation with a friend, and I don't know, I just started talking without overthinking every word or grammar rule. And to my surprise, they actually understood me. And I think from that point on, I felt so much more confident in my ability to, actually communicate.
That's fantastic. That's a perfect example of what the study's talking about. It's about letting go of that fear of messing up and just embracing those moments of genuine connection, even if your grammar isn't, picture perfect.
Yeah, yeah. So how do we actually cultivate that confidence and fluency at this B1 level? What are some of the specific strategies that the study recommends?
Well, this is where those authentic materials we mentioned earlier become even more important. We're talking radio programs, podcasts, movies, TV shows, anything that exposes you to the language as it's actually spoken, out in the wild.
So instead of just relying on textbooks, we're really immersing ourselves in the real deal.
Exactly. And the study goes a step further and says, don't just passively listen or watch. Actively engage with that material. Take notes on new vocabulary. Rewind and repeat phrases that trip you up. Maybe even try shadowing the speakers to practice your pronunciation.
Shadowing, what's that?
Oh, it's a cool technique. Basically, you listen to a recording and you try to repeat what you hear as closely as possible, like you're, mimicking the speaker's rhythm and intonation. It's a really good way to train your ear and improve your pronunciation.
Hmm, that sounds like a fun challenge. I'm gonna have to try that. What about reading? What kind of material should we be tackling at this level?
At B1, you can start exploring longer and more challenging texts. Think novels, short stories, magazine articles, even blogs or online forums about topics that, pique your interest. The most important thing is to find stuff that's engaging enough to keep you reading.
Right, because the more you read, the more you absorb like those sentence structures and vocabulary and all those little idiomatic expressions that, really bring the language to life.
Exactly. And reading also helps with your writing skills, too. The study actually recommends keeping a journal in German at this stage. It's a really nice, low pressure way to practice putting your thoughts into words and playing around with different grammatical structures.
Oh, I love that idea. It's like a playground for your language. You can experiment, you can make mistakes,
Mm.
and you learn from them without, the stress of being graded or judged.
Yeah, totally. It's a safe space. And it's also a great way to track your progress. Looking back at your old entries can be super motivating. You can really see how far you've come.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we're listening to authentic content, reading more challenging stuff. We're journaling in German. We're shadowing native speakers like language ninjas.
Yeah.
This B1 level sounds pretty intense,
Right.
but I have a feeling it's all building towards something even bigger.
Oh, absolutely. The B1 level is laying the groundwork for B2, and that's where things get really, really exciting. That's the level where you transition from just, understanding and using the language to actually thinking in German.
Thinking in German. Okay, now you've really got me hooked.
I know, right?
Tell me more.
Well, that's where we'll pick up in part 3. Stay tuned.
All right, we're back.
Mm.
And I gotta say, my mind is racing after that last part. You left us hanging with that idea of, thinking in
I
German.
know, right? It's a little mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. It's like, almost sounds like a superpower. What does that actually mean, and how do we even get there?
Yeah, it's not quite a superpower, but it can definitely feel like one. It's that moment when you stop translating everything in your head and you just start processing information directly in German.
Wow.
Like the language just becomes part of you.
Yeah, yeah. That sounds incredible, but also a little bit intimidating, if I'm being honest. I mean, I imagine it takes, like, a lot of effort to reach that level.
It definitely takes dedication, no doubt about that, but the study suggests it's actually a natural progression. It happens as you consistently challenge yourself, and the rewards are definitely worth the effort.
So, okay, at the B2 level, we're not just learning the language, we're actually starting to live in it, in a way.
Exactly. You're engaging with more complex ideas, you're expressing, those subtle opinions. You might even start dreaming in German, who knows?
Whoa, dreaming in German.
Yeah.
That's next level stuff. So, so how do we get there? What are the key stepping stones on that path to thinking in German?
Well, the study recommends kind of a multi-pronged approach. One really important element is continuing to immerse yourself in authentic content, but at a higher level of complexity.
Okay.
Think full-length movies, TV series, novels by German authors, even academic articles or professional publications related to, whatever field you're in.
So we're always raising the bar, pushing ourselves a little bit further outside that comfort zone.
That's it. And it's not just passively taking it all in either. It's about actively engaging with the material. For example, instead of just watching a movie, try discussing it with a language partner or like even writing a review in German.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're reading a book, try summarizing each chapter in your own words, really focusing on using those new vocabulary and grammar points you've learned.
That makes a lot of sense. So what about grammar? I mean, at this level, I imagine it gets pretty hairy.
It definitely can. But the good news is you've already built a strong foundation in those earlier levels. Now it's about fine-tuning your understanding and really mastering those intricate grammatical structures.
Okay.
And one thing the study emphasizes is that the best way to learn grammar at this stage isn't through rote memorization, like drilling those conjugations over and over. It's about application, using it in real situations.
So less about memorizing and more about doing. I like that.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to do that is through conversation. The study really recommends finding those language partners or joining like a conversation group, where you can practice speaking German in a relaxed and supportive environment.
Yeah, I've heard that those language exchange apps and websites can be really helpful for that, for finding conversation partners. Have you had any experience with
I
those?
have, yeah. And I think they can be fantastic resources. They connect you with native German speakers who are trying to learn your language. So it's kind of like a win-win.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not just about practicing your speaking either. It's also about, learning about each other's cultures and perspectives.
Yeah, that's a great point. It makes the whole learning process much more engaging and meaningful.
Hmm.
And, it ties back to that idea of Vygotsky's sociocultural theory, the importance of those interactions, that social context in language learning.
Right. And, the more you interact with the language in a real world context, the more natural it will become to actually think in German.
Yeah.
It just becomes less about, that conscious translation process and more about instinct and intuition.
That's such a cool thought. So, okay, we've reached this B2 level. We're thinking in German. We're engaging with all this complex content. What's next? Is there even like a level beyond that?
There is. It's the C1, C2 level, which is essentially
The
mastery.
mastery. Wow, that sounds like almost mythical. What does mastery even mean in the context of language learning?
It means reaching that level of fluency and nuance where you can communicate effortlessly in pretty much any situation. You're able to, understand and produce complex language, navigate those like subtle cultural differences, and even grasp those idiomatic expressions that leave even native speakers scratching their heads sometimes.
So it's like reaching the summit of the German language mountain.
Yeah, you could definitely say that.
Yeah.
But even then, the journey doesn't necessarily end there. Even at the C1, C2 level, there's always something more to learn, more to explore, more to discover, both about the language and about the culture that it represents.
That's a really great point. It's not about just reaching some, finish line. It's about embracing that journey of lifelong learning. And I think
Mhm.
that's what makes language learning so rewarding.
Hmm.
It just opens up these new worlds, new perspectives, new ways of thinking.
Couldn't agree more. And I think this study, with its approach and all these insightful recommendations, it really provides a fantastic roadmap for anyone who's, thinking about embarking on this incredible journey.
Absolutely. So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to take that plunge, remember, the key is to find what works for you, stay motivated, and most importantly, just enjoy the ride.
And don't underestimate the power of consistency. Even small, dedicated efforts over time, they can lead to some truly remarkable results.
Well said. And who knows, maybe one day you'll find yourself casually dropping Donnerdampfgefahrtsgesellschaftskapitän into a conversation, just for kicks.
I wouldn't be surprised. So yeah, go out there, language learners. Embrace the challenge. The world of German awaits.
That's it for our deep dive into the fascinating world of learning German. We hope you found it insightful, inspiring, and, most importantly, motivating.
Absolutely. Until next time, happy learning.
Mhm.